The sun was just starting to stretch its golden fingers across the rolling hills of eastern Colorado when Jake Turner stepped onto the porch of his grandfather's ranch. The air carried that crisp bite of early morning, thick with the smell of dry earth and hay, and the only sounds were the distant trill of meadowlarks and the groan of old wood under Jake's boots. At 17, Jake was already filling out, his shoulders broad like his grandfather, Hank Turner, the man who'd raised him since he was a kid. Hank was out by the barn, same as every morning, latching the gate with the kind of precision that came from 76 years of routine. The Turners weren't big on fuss, but they lived by rhythm, steady beat that kept life from fraying out here, miles from the nearest asphalt. Hank's dad had bought this land after the Korean War, back when folks called it worthless scrub, fit for coyotes and not much else. But he saw what others missed. A creek snaking through the southeast corner, fed by a spring buried deep into shale, pure as anything left in the county. While other ranchers drilled wells that dried up in a few years, the Turner's Creek kept flowing, clean, and mineral-rich. Hank never sold a single acre, not to developers or anyone else. To him, land was blood, a promise he didn't break. When Jake's mom left 8 years ago, dropping him off with a quick kiss and a duffel bag, Hank didn't flinch. He just handed Jake a pair of gloves, pointed to the pasture, and said, "Fence needs checking." That was it. No big talk, no drama, just work. Since then, they'd built something stronger than words, a bond forged in dawn chores, quiet evenings, and the unspoken rule that Sir V.Y. Val out here didn't care for chatter. Jake had grown up with the land's pulscattle births, bitter winters, the hum of Hank's sharpening tools before sunrise. He knew how to hold a rifle, spot a sick horse, and listen when Hank's voice dipped just a hair below normal. So when Hank came in one morning, wiped his boots harder than usual, and sat down with his coffee without a word, Jake knew something was wrong. Hank always sipped slow, staring into his mug like it held secrets. That day he drank fast. "Sheriff's truck's down by the creek," he said, eyes fixed on the table. "Parked half off the trail, like he owns it." Jake frowned but stayed quiet. Cops didn't come out here unless trouble was brewing. Hank stood, moved to the window, and nudged the faded curtain. "Third time this week. Same guy. Black SUV, cracked back window, dented door. Sits by the deep end, engine running. Doesn't knock, doesn't step out." Jake joined him, squinting toward the ridge where the brush swallowed the dirt track. From here, you couldn't see much, but Hank's tone said he'd seen plenty. They didn't fence that far back the land's rise, and the creek's edge made it pointless unless you were hauling feed or fixing pipes. Hank wasn't one for cameras. He said they made you lazy, but he kept binoculars by the door and used them like scripture. That's how he'd spotted the man uniformed, badge glinting, radio on the dash, just sitting there, staring at the water like it might talk. Later, Hank rode out on his rattling old utility cart, Jake trailing on horseback. The SUV was gone, but fresh tire tracks scarred the ground, and the grass was flattened where someone had stood too long. Hank knelt, dipped his hand in the creek, sniffed it, and spat. "Smells wrong," he muttered, Leah VYing Jake puzzled but silent. Hank didn't explain much. Next morning, Jake saw the truck first, creeping down from the ridge while he hauled feed. This time, the driver was out, standing by the water with a black case, lowering a steel probe into the current. Jake rode back fast. Hank was at the workbench, tightening a shovel handle. "Get the lockbox," he said, not looking up. "Top shelf, red lid." Inside were deeds, maps, water rights papers going back decades. Hank spread them on the kitchen table. "This line," he said, jabbing a finger, "is where the county easement ends. He's a quarter-mile past it. If he's testing that water, it ain't for fish." Hank didn't jump to conclusions, but he trusted patterns, and this one stank. He'd seen what happened when outsiders sniffed around private, land-unannounced VY sits. Letters choked with legalese, permits you never asked for. His land had stayed clear of that for years, but now someone with a badge was poking around, ignoring basic courtesy. It reminded Hank of the water wars in Wyoming back in the 90s, when neighbors turned on each other faster than a grass fire. The third time a truck showed, Hank didn't watch from afar. He marched right up, boots crunching gravel. The driver, Deputy Tom Carver, rolled down his window, but stayed put. Middle-aged, sunglasses mirroring the sky, face like stone. "Morning," Hank said, calm but firm. "You're 300 yards past the easement, son." Carver didn't bite at first. Then, without turning, he said, "Just observing. Routine patrol." Hank nodded. "Routine or not, you're trespassing. This is private land." Carver's smile was cold. "Maybe not for long," he said, then rolled the window up. Hank didn't speak on the way back, but Jake felt the tension radiating off him like heat off a stove. This wasn't just a truck anymore. It was about the land, the water, and a warning wrapped in steel. Days later, Jake was fixing a gate when he heard the SUV's telltale rattle. He squinted and saw it pull up by the creek, same spot, one tire sinking into the mud. Carver stepped out, confident, like the ground was his. He didn't glance at Jake or Hank, who stood in the barn's shade, arms crossed. Carver opened the back hatch, pulled out a tripod and a sleek VYC, and set it up by the water, tapping a tablet as it hummed. Hank stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "Deputy, I haven't gotten any county notice about tests on my land. What's that thing looking for?" Carr personally didn't look up. "Not county business. Multi-agency water quality study. Doesn't concern you." Hank's eyes narrowed. "Then why no notice? This creek's protected by senior rights, documented since '57. Carver stood, his smile thin. "That's the problem, Mr. Turner. Those rights are under VYEW. Some things don't stay grandfathered forever." Hank didn't respond right away, his silence heavy with calculation. "VYEW by who?" he asked. Carver shrugged. "Not my call. You'll get papers when it's time. Don't interfere with state business, that's obstruction." He turned back to his gear, dismissing Hank like he was nothing. That night, Hank barely spoke, working with a grim focus. He fixed a fence that didn't need it, his movements sharp. Jake tried to focus on cleaning the tack room, but Carver's words under VYEW hung like a threat. Hank hadn't served VY ved droughts and disputes by ignoring warnings. Next morning, he drove to town, returning with faded folders stuffed with legal papers. He pored over them, jotting notes, pulling out water maps. That evening, he unrolled an old cloth-back map, pointing to a boundary looping the creek. "This watershed was recorded in '63, he said, long before these state boys thought they could redraw it. Trouble hit harder days later. Jake was riding the south pasture when he saw the cattle bunched up, edgy. At the creek, the water ran yellow, sharp-smelling, unnatural. He told Hank, who grabbed a mason jar, filled it, and sealed it with the date. "You don't trust their tests," he said, DRIVYing it to a private lab. The results showed a chlorination compound not deadly, but alien to their spring. Someone had tampered with the creek, likely during Carver's patrols. Hank didn't accuse outright. Instead, he prepped. He moved the old tractor to the upper pasture, tuning it like a weapon. For 6 days, Carver vanished. No tracks, no VY sits. But on the 7th, the rear gate was open, its padlock gone. A trench scarred the trail, like heavy equipment had rolled through. Hank picked up a twisted wire, his voice low. "They're measuring depth, testing how far they can push." Jake swallowed. "What now?" Hank's eyes glinted. "We wait for their mistake." Rain came that night, steady, tapping the roof. Hank sat by the window, coffee cold, watching the ridge. At dawn, they rode to the south edge and found deep tire tracks, fresh from the night, leading to snapped fence posts and clipped wire. By the creek, a tarp covered a pit with a humming pump and a hose in the water. Hank pulled it back, stared, then walked away. At home, he opened a ledger from the gun safe, flipping to a note. No jurisdiction. He drove to the county office, demanding records. The clerk found no filings, no permits. Hank nodded and left. Days later, a county worker showed up with a clipboard, claiming to verify the land. Hank blocked him at the gate. "Wrong property," he said, VYing. That night, Jake found a survey marker by the trail. Hank didn't talk, but the tractor came out, rigged with steel and chains. At dusk, when Carver's SUV returned, Hank drove down, headlights off. Jake watched through binoculars as Hank chained the bumper. Carver stepped out, hand on his holster. "Take it off my land," Hank said, "or it stays." He handed Carver a folder water rights, pumped photos, the clerk's letter. Carver didn't take it. He backed off, drove away, but that night, someone cut the fence. New tire marks, not Carver's, appeared. Hank found a hidden stake by the runoff, subtle, marking a buried box. He set up cameras, catching a stranger at 3:17 a.m., planting something by the creek. Hank consulted a hydrologist friend, who warned of sneaky land reclassifications. A letter arrived, vague, about rezoning re-VYEW. Hank burned it. Then a sensor appeared by the fence, logging data. Hank buried it. "They want a case," he said. "I'll give 'em silence." The air turned cold, metallic. A silver truck watched the boundary for hours. The west gate was unlocked, with boot prints and gouges. Hank called a retired forester, Morris, to check for secret registries. He tightened the ranch's defensive sensors, felled trees, welded bars. One night, a rumble woke them. By the creek, 3 men set up a work light and sensors, Carver watching. Hank didn't confront them. He dumped scrap across the trail, posting a sign, "Private road. Trespassers documented." Morris confirmed the land was flagged for infrastructure redirection. No signatures. Hank sat on the porch, planning. The creek was their excuse, so he'd take it away. At dawn, he drove to the ridge, spotting a steel brace container by the creek, antenna blinking. He found the old culvert path, weak from storms. "They build on the softest spot," he said. "They don't know the land." Hank loaded the tractor with cinder blocks and beams, chaining it tight. He taped the 1959 deed to the barn door, marked for the record. At dusk, he parked the tractor across the trail, rigging it to block the culvert. If the water rises, he told Jake, it'll wash their gear out. They built a wedge of rocks to funnel the flow. Rain came at midnight, steady. By dawn, the container tilted, then fell into the creek, wrecked. Carver returned, staring at the ruin. "You think this changes anything?" he snapped. Hank shrugged. "You put it here without a permit. I just let the water show you the line." Carver sneered. "You don't win this." Hank leaned in. "This ain't about winning, son. It's about fences you can't see." Carver left, silent. Weeks passed, quiet. A letter from an agency admitted a discrepancy, halting operations. Hank and Jake rebuilt the creek's edge, working in silence. Hank taught Jake to read the soil, to shape the water's path. A new sign went up. "Private waters, respected boundaries." The container's frame rusted in the creek, a bridge to nowhere. Jake felt the land's weight now, its memory. Hank checked the deed one last time, smiling ready. The creek ran clear, but the fight left questions. Was Carver rogue, or part of something bigger? Should Hank have gone to court instead of the creek? Was the land safe, or was just waiting for the next badge? Comment below what would you have done? Like, subscribe, and let's hear your take.